What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mike Versatile, and for today's video I'm going to show you guys how I create this composite image using a tracked Milky Way sky and a twilight foreground. Here is the foreground right here unedited, and then here is my tracked Milky Way sky from the same night. Now this is at Eagle Lake, and you can see there's a lot of water movement going on here, so we get the band across the water like this instead of like a still reflection with the stars and everything like that. So this is a little bit trickier, but it's actually really not that hard to mimic. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Now the photo you're looking at right now is from a time lapse that I took, and I use this as my reference to try and recreate this photo as best as possible. And I think I did a pretty good job. So here's a shot at night, and then here is a twilight shot blended with a tracked Milky Way sky. And I think the colors and the reflection are pretty close. I could probably make it a little bit better, but this looks relatively natural compared to had I not done anything with the water and just used the blue hour as is. You can see it looks okay, but not as realistic as this shot right here. So we're going to go over how to achieve this look. Now one thing I do want to point out when dealing with shooting lakes like this, if you take a foreground shot during twilight that's too bright and you can see the water, you have the ripples and everything going on, this is a dead giveaway that you shot your foreground during twilight and then you blended it with the Milky Way sky. It's not going to look that good. So you want to make sure that it's astronomical twilight or nautical twilight like it is here, and you take a really long exposure to get that movement in the water, which is going to make it look more realistic when we go to create our composite shot. So that's just one thing I want to point out. So let's jump right into editing this foreground and getting it prepared to do my Milky Way blend. So first thing I want to do is lower the contrast. We want to bring down the highlights. Now this is all going to vary a little bit with your photo depending how bright it is. The sun was setting over here, so I have to lower this quite a bit. We could up the shadows a little bit, lower the whites, and bring the highlights up just a hair. I'm going to ignore texture, clarity, and dehaze. I'm going to desaturate a little bit. We want to try and make this very flat looking, like starlight. Since I have quite a bit of orange and yellow from the sunset still lingering in the water right here, I'm going to go to my saturation panel and remove some of the orange as well as the yellow. And we'll take out some blue. And I think that's it. We'll leave everything else alone. So this looks pretty flat looking, definitely not too much contrast, and it's gonna make our blend look a lot more natural. You know what, there's one thing I didn't do. I want to warm this up a little bit as well. So go to my white balance and make it a little bit warmer. Okay, now I want to grab my foreground and my tracked Milky Way sky, and we're going to bring those over into Photoshop. So go to Edit In, Open as Layers in Photoshop. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to copy my layers just so I have some backups. And here's my sky layer. This is a little bit smaller, so let me just fix that. Edit Free Transform, and just want to stretch that out. Okay. The first thing I want to do is replace the sky. So we're going to go to Edit, Sky Replacement. Now the same Milky Way photo that I'm using for my water reflection, I already brought it into Sky Replacement, so you're going to have to do that as well. It's very easy. All you got to do is hit this drop down menu, hit the little plus button, and then find wherever you have your tracked Milky Way sky and import it. So I already imported mine, and I located it already, so we just got to place it where we'd like. So right here is fine. And I'm going to just do this really quickly, but obviously the values that I set here are going to be slightly different than what you have. So we'll just do a couple little tweaks. All right. And since this is just a quick tutorial, I'm not going to go too crazy and zoom in and make this perfect. You get the idea. All right, and adjust the color here and hit OK. Now sometimes if it's a little too bright here, what I like to do is make sure you are not on the sky layer but actual foreground layer, and take your burn tool, put on shadow, and then just hit these shadows up a little bit here to darken the horizon, just to make the blend look a little more natural. Again, I'm just doing this really quickly. I would take my time and really fine-tune that, but you get the idea. Now what we want to do is take the other Milky Way image, which is this layer right here. We're going to drag that to the top. Go to Edit, Transform, and we're going to flip it vertical. I'm going to lower the opacity just so I could place it in the right spot. So we're just going to pull this down here. So that looks pretty good right there. We could bring the opacity back up. Next, what we want to do is change the blend mode. So select where it says normal, and we're going to change this. Now there's two different blend modes that I like to use. You could either go with multiply, or we could go down to overlay. Overlay is a little bit brighter, and I'm going to stick with that for this particular edit. So you could see how it overlaid on top of the water. It's also over everything else as well. We're going to brush all that stuff out, so that's not a big deal. But here we have reflections as if it was still water. We know there's a lot of movement in this lake, so we don't want to have these type of reflections. So what we have to do next is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we're going to play with these values. Basically what we want to do is still see the colors of the Milky Way and some of the outline of the Milky Way, but very faintly. We're trying to mimic what it looked like in my stacked photos, which is an accurate representation of what it looked like at night. So this is pretty close, so I'm going to hit OK. And there we go. Now we have the nice reflection of the Milky Way colors in the water, as well as some of the green air glow that's in the sky, which looks really awesome. So we just have to brush out the rest of this image that's bleeding into the sky. So what we want to do is create a layer mask, grab our brush. It's on black already, so this will reveal what's underneath. So for the sky, I'm going to put it at 100% and start brushing all this excess photo away that we don't need. And as we get closer to the horizon, we could make the brush a little bit smaller and also lower the opacity of the brush a little bit. So we'll go down to about 50%. And just carefully go along the horizon. We also want to brush out the foreground here that was affected when we did that. I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit more to about 10% and just brush out certain areas in the trees and the little weed areas over here and just lighten those up, and also go across the log a little bit. Now it's okay for the log to pick up some of the color of the sky as it might do naturally anyway, but if you don't want to be as strong of like this air glows like really green, if you want to reduce some of that, we could brush over that. and that's looking pretty good. So there you have it. Now we have a nice Milky Way core reflection in smooth water. Some people are probably going to ask how I did a meteor in the sky. When you do a time lapse, you tend to catch a couple meteors. What I'd like to do is take that meteor and isolate it. So I already did that, and I'm going to drop it in here. And I darken the background, and now I could just rescale it, rotate it, put it wherever I want. And then you change the blend mode. Let me just fix this really quick. You just change the blend mode to lighten and hit enter. Oops. And let's zoom in here. And there you have it. That's how you could throw in a meteor. Obviously you could adjust the size of this and brightness and all that stuff. But I figured that might be a question that somebody's going to ask me, so that's how you do that. And yeah, I think that came out really good. Let's jump back to Lightroom really quick. So here is the Milky Way stack that I took. I'm just going to shrink this down so we can do a side-by-side. Alright, so here's a quick comparison of what we just did versus the stacked images that I took from my Milky Way time-lapse. Now this was a little bit earlier in the night, and you could see the color difference slightly. There's a lot more air glow in my tracked image versus the stacked shots right here. So that's why we have a little more green tint in this photo right here. With that aside, I think this still looks really natural. You know, you saw what it started out with. We had this shot right here, which, let me reset the values. This is how our foreground started, and this is how it ended up. It looks a lot more authentic to what it really would look like at night, as we can see from here. So hopefully this tutorial helps you guys out, and I'm gonna do another one in about a week showing you guys how to do really good reflections in still water with the Milky Way. So stay tuned for that, guys. Take care. Bye bye.